We'll start our construction of the Inside Out Halloween house by working on Section 1. Section 1 is the innermost part of the house, and it is entirely made with chipboard, medium weight chipboard, and on the cutting guide you'll see Section 1 listed here and all of its parts listed underneath there. So I have all of those parts cut out. I only have a few of them in front of me here because we need to do some sub-cutting on those. And the other thing you'll need is from the templates, you'll need the page 1 of 8 template, which has the cutting guide for both the outside and the inside walls. So these two pieces are the size of these diagrams on the templates. So we'll need those pieces to start. I'm going to start by marking the holes on the outside piece. There are 2 holes, and we also have a ridge line to cut out. Now the dimensions are given on the side here of the template, and there's a center line that comes down the middle. So from the center top, we're coming down 3/4 of an inch on either side, and that will make our ridge line. And then for both of the openings, they are 1/2 inch in from each side. And then coming up from the bottom, there's a measure line here that tells you the distance for each measurement. When you get to this top window here, the sides are 1 3/4 inches. Then you'll draw a line across 1/2 inch above that intersects with the center line here, and that will make the peak for this opening. On the inside piece, we again have that same ridge line at the top. It has a center line, and you measure down 3/4 of an inch for the 2 points. And then there's only one opening on the inside. It's 1/4 of an inch in from each side. It starts 1 inch up from the bottom, and then there's a straight piece that's 3.5 inches tall, and then the peak of this curve is 3/4 of an inch. And you can just freehand that so that the entire measurement from the bottom to the top of the curve would be 3.5 plus 3/4 or 4 1/4 inches tall. But just freehand a nice gentle curve that comes up and meets that 3/4 inch line. I'll show you that when I get it marked out. So now I've got my outline marked for the inside hole. I have the vertical lines drawn that come up to 3.5 inches tall, and then I've marked the center point that is 3/4 of an inch above that, and then I'll just take my pencil and I'll just kind of freehand and connect these points. And if you want to have something that matches exactly on both sides without freehanding the second side, you can trace that first side and flip it over and put it on the second side. But I think you'll be able to just freehand that, and it will look just fine. So I'll go ahead and finish drawing that curve and then cut out this hole. And when you cut out this curved shape, just have a very sharp blade in your craft knife and take your time. And you can always use a file or an emery board or something if your curve needs a little improvement. So now I have my holes for the openings cut out, and I took a minute with my eraser and cleaned everything up, and now I can set those two aside. And then we have another little bit of sub-cutting to do. I have the 2 pieces that are the dormer front and back. They're 2 inches wide by 2 1/4 tall. Make sure you orient them so that the 2 1/4 is vertically. And then I also have the back for outside box 1, and I have that oriented the long way. And what I'm going to do for each one of these pieces is mark a center point on these 2-inch ones. That's easy. This one is 2 1/8 inches wide, so make sure you get that center right in the center. Use a centering ruler. And then come down a 1/2 inch for all 3 pieces and mark tick marks. And we're going to cut a gable on each one. So a 1/2 inch tall gable on each one, marking a center point at the top. And that completes our prep work for section 1. Next, we're going to make the boxes that go around each one of these shapes. And I'm starting first with the outside, where we have 2 boxes. Box 1 is on the top and box 2 is on the bottom. So when you look at your cutting guide, you can take all your little 1/4 inch pieces, and the ones for box 1, put them out here by the top shape, and the ones for box 2 go by the bottom shape. Now, the ones that go horizontally are 1/8 inch longer than the opening, and these little diagonal ones are also slightly longer than the top edges here. We'll start by just putting a thin line of glue right next to the vertical sides, and then put your little piece standing straight up, and on the box 1, the top one, align it with the bottom of the opening, and for box 2 it should they're cut to be the exact length of that opening. So I'm using a fine detail gluer, so I can put a fine line of glue, and I'll put each of those 4 pieces on there and I'll allow them to set up for a minute. Now here I think you can see I've got my 4 vertical pieces attached. And now I'll do the horizontal pieces, these 3 pieces, and they're cut long enough so they will overlap the ends of the vertical pieces. So make sure you put a little bit of glue right here on the bottom edge of each one and the top edge of each one when you put those pieces in. And then finally we can put some glue on the edge of the 2 short pieces. They will go right along these diagonals. They should be able to go right along that edge, and if they're a little long, they can go on top of the verticals. If not, if you have a problem with that, just give a little trim so that you get a nice finish on that top angled edge. And once you have the little box sides put on there, just set this piece aside to let that glue dry, and we'll put the sides on our inside box. For the inside box, our sides are much deeper. They're 3/4 inch. They're a little easier to handle. We'll again put the side pieces in first, and they come even with the bottom opening, and I'll just glue those 2 sides in. I have one of my precision steel blocks here, which I'm going to just fit into each corner in turn and use that as an aid to get these pieces in vertically and keep them aligned. If you don't have something like that, if you have something else that's square, you could use that. Or it's not that critical, so you can just, do it by eye. And again, the floor for this box is cut 1/8 inch longer than the opening so that we can put a little glue on the 2 ends, which will fit on top of our 2 vertical sides, and go ahead and glue that floor piece in. So in the meantime, we can go back to the outside and run a bead of glue along the edges of our little walls, and then we can fit the backs on, and they are sized to fit exactly on top. And if you're like me and you have writing on the piece so you know what it is, make sure that the side with no writing faces down inside of that hole, and just glue both the back to box 1 and box 2 on. Now back to the inside wall and that box where we have the curved ceiling, and we have a piece of lightweight chipboard that we cut 3/4 of an inch by 3 1/4. I'm just kind of running my thumb along the inside to encourage it to curve, and then I'm going to butt it up against one edge and work it around to the other side and see. I can see I need to cut off about 1/8 of an inch or so that it will meet on this other side over here. So I'll do that. And now I've got something that fits. You may not need to trim. You may possibly need a slightly longer piece. You shouldn't, but I've also cut a piece of black cardstock here that is 3/4 of an inch wide by 4 1/4 long, and I'm going to attach that with some score tape, and I'll put score tape on the entire back of this piece and then center my piece of lightweight chipboard so that the black cardstock is on the inside of the curve. Then I'll take a black marker and just go on I'm going to do both edges so I don't have to worry about which side is up and which side is down. But you especially want the side that is going to face down towards your open window. And so then we'll put a bead of glue. You can put it on the chipboard or right along the edge here. And then your tabs that have score tape on, they will join to the inside of the edges, so that you'll get a nice connection point between the sides, and it should stay firmly on. So I've run glue on the top of each of the verticals and along that edge, and I'll fasten my score tape side on one side and then work it around to the other side and fasten it there. And once you have that in place, just put it flat on your table and put a little pressure on it so it's making good contact there for a few seconds until that glue has a chance to grab, and then we'll let that just dry for a moment. Now under the cutting guide in the last section and under miscellaneous, there's something called a skinny strip, and it's a piece of medium weight chipboard that's 1/8 of an inch wide, and it's bendy on its 12-inch side. You can see how easily this bends. And we're just going to cut a piece that's 3 inches long from this strip, and then take some glue and put it right along the top of that curve there. And you may need to have it a little bit shorter so that it's not too long. It doesn't have to go edge to edge. It's just to give us a little more gluing surface when we put the back on. So get that attached. So once you have that little skinny strip attached, you can go ahead and put the back on. Now this back we just cut rectangular, and it'll extend a little bit on top, but it should fit side by side. So just run your glue around all these edges and then put the back on. And again, if you have writing on it, make sure that the plain side is facing towards the inside of the hole. And that completes the construction of the boxes. Section 1 gets assembled by gluing the sides together, but before we do that we need to do a little prep work. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line to connect the bottom points of the two gables. Next we'll put some pieces on to help the assembly, and these I call ledger strips. They're listed under miscellaneous on the cutting guide. They're cut from medium weight chipboard, and they have score tape on the back side. Now I'm just using craft color here so that you'll be able to see it more easily against the black. So I'm going to cut 4 pieces that are 1 inch wide, and then I'll cut 4 pieces that are 2.5 inches wide to start with. So 4 at 1 and 4 at 2.5. So I've got these pieces cut, and we'll take the short ones and we'll center them on our narrower sides, and we're going to hold them back 1/16 of an inch from the bottom. And if you have a challenge just eyeballing that 1/16 of an inch, you can use the width of a piece of chipboard or your ruler, but you want to hold that back from the bottom edge 1/16 of an inch. And I'll repeat that on the other short side, and then I'll center 2 of the long ones on the bottom of the wider sides, again holding it back 1/16 of an inch. Now that I have these 4 pieces on, I'm going to turn everything around, and I'll put the other 4 pieces in. On the longer piece, the wider sides, I'll hold it back 1/16 of an inch from that edge so it will go nearer to the center of the building. Like that. And then on the skinny sides, just hold it back 1/16 of an inch from the edge. And these pieces are just to give the base and the top piece something to rest on. Now I'm going to take my 2 wider sides and put them aside for a moment, and I'll take my 2 longer sides and orient them this way on my table. And now I'm going to cut 4 ledger strips that are 7.5 inches long. 7.5. Now these ledger strips are to give us additional gluing surface when we put the sides and all together, and they will go centered on our narrow sides, and they will go right up against the edges. So you can take it and stand it up on edge, and then put the ledger strip right next to it, and that way you'll make sure you get it right on that edge. And then flip it around and do the same thing on the other side, and repeat for the other narrow side. After you have all of the ledger strips attached, make sure you take your bone folder and give all of them a good burnish. Now we're ready for some assembly. I'm going to take one of my narrow sides and run glue along the edge. And make sure I get it on that ledger strip as well, so we have that nice wide gluing surface for most of that length. And then I'll line it up, make sure I keep that bottom edge exactly even, and the outside will fit even with the outside of our wider side. Now I have my steel blocks that can help me keep everything straight. If you don't have something like that, find something in your craft room that will work and help you keep everything straight and on the edges. And you can let one side dry and then put a bead of glue along the edge of your other narrow side and put it down on the other side. Once those sides have set up, you can run glue along those top edges. Make sure you get it onto the ledger strip there, and then put your remaining side on. The ledger strips always go towards the inside of the structure. And then just let that thoroughly dry. Once your four sides or top side is attached, you can stand it up and run a bead of glue along those ledger strips, and take one of your pieces that's marked base or top and put it in one side, and then flip it over and then run the bead of glue along the top of those ledger strips and put the other piece in. And when you have the base and the top in, put it on your gridded mat. It should be fitting right inside of a 1 1/2 inch by 3 inch space. So make sure that it is square, that you don't have it racked. The base and the top piece should help you keep it nice and square and prevent it racking, which is just when it turns into more of a parallelogram than a rectangle. And we'll just let that set up and dry. Now we have 2 more pieces for the roof, but we'll just keep them with this, but we won't attach them yet. Section 1 has a little dormer, and we previously cut the ridge lines for the front and back, and now we'll just make it into a unit. We have some little skinny 1/8 inch wide pieces. 2 of them are 1 3/4 long, and they'll go on the sides, and 2 are 1 7/8, and they'll go on the top and the bottom. We'll start by taking the 1 3/4, and I just have one of my dormer. I just picked one and I said it was the back. And the little 1/8 inch piece will go flush with the bottom, and it should not go past the top corner here. If you, so I would do just a little dry fit first and make sure that it's the right length on both sides. It can be a little bit shorter. It'll be covered by the roof if it is. And so I'm going to put those 2 side ones on first. Now I have my 2 little side pieces on, and I've prepped to glue my bottom and top in. Now sometimes this chipboard isn't exactly a 1/16 of an inch thick. This piece that I have seems like it's a little bit narrower, so I actually cut these strips a little bit longer than 1 7/8 just so they would fit in there nicely. So just do a little dry fit and see, and you can always just cut off another little piece from your 1/8 inch skinny strip if you need another piece. And then up here for this top one, just take, if you need a guideline, take your ruler across the top there and draw a line. And this one will fit right in between the top, right underneath that gable. You can see where I ran that bead of glue. And now that I have all 4 of those little walls on, I just run a bead of glue along the top, and I'm going to take my other side of my dormer and I'll just stand it up here so that I get everything nicely aligned. And having that little 1/8 inch makes just a little relief and gives it a little more interest when it's on the side of the building. So again, we have 2 little roof pieces that go with this dormer, but we're not going to put them on yet. I'll just keep them with the dormer, and so that I have them together. And that completes the construction for section 1.